But Lord, remember me and mine, with mercies temporal and divine, that I for gear and grace may shine, excelled by name, and the glory shall be thine. Amen. Amen.
My name's Travis. I like beer. It's good for you.
Hello again, and welcome back to the channel. I'm your host, and today we are continuing our Best of and Worst of series, following up from the Disney Animated Classics series of videos I did a couple of months ago with what do people think the best and worst Pixar films are. So in this video, I am going to look at a total of, I believe, around 72 different people who ranked all of the Pixar films, or at the very least gave a vote for absolute best and absolute worst of the ones that they had seen. And among these were 26 YouTuber ranks, 36 online print ranks, and 10 people that I know personally, including myself in this sample size as well. So just about 72 votes for absolute best and absolute worst, based on mostly rankings that I will read out fully at the end of the video, so that if you would like, you can go to check my work or just watch the rankings that I sampled and see what they had to say about all of the films. So without further ado, we are going to get into our three categories that we are looking at today. Films that got at least one vote for worst overall Pixar film, films that got at least one vote for overall best Pixar film, and the smaller category of films that didn't get a vote for either one. So, the most mid, you might say.
You'll be able to know which one's the best, and which one's the least best. The worst.
The first category, films that got at least one vote for worst Pixar film overall, at least one last place rank. There are 8 overall, and we will be going up from least votes to most, and explaining exactly why each of these might be at the bottom of somebody's list. First up is Luca.
It's a human thing. I'm kind of an expert.
What does it mean? The thing you just said?
Luca got one last place vote, and it is in fact the only film in the entire Pixar canon that got both an absolute first and absolute last placement from at least one ranker each. Just like Meet the Robinsons in the Disney animated canon became the only film in that sample of films that got exactly one vote for first and last place each. So yes, Luca got this one last place vote, and it was one of the last votes that I took for the sample size at all, and I don't think that this ranker had seen every single Pixar film, but of the ones that they had seen, it just didn't strike them. I believe that they liked all of the movies well enough, but that this was just the weakest one to them. And, there's no accounting for taste at a certain point. Most people would not say that Luca is the worst Pixar film overall. In fact, only 1 out of 72 that I could find. But that was one of the 8 that got at least one vote for last. Next up is Toy Story 4, with 2 votes for absolute last.
Right inside there.
And this film also got one number 2 rank in one of the ranks, the second closest of any of these movies to getting an absolute first and absolute last place vote. And people really dislike Toy Story 4 because I gather that people feel like it betrayed Woody's character, that they completely changed Bo Peep around, and a lot of people do not like the girl bossification of her, but also just the complete change around of the character. Yeah, it's difficult to say. It's a film that's very good looking in lots of ways, and it has a lot going on in a lot of areas. I don't hate Forky as a character at all, but a lot of people just don't like the new additions to the cast nearly as much as any of the new additions in either 2 or 3, or the original cast for that matter. And they feel like also, I think I've seen a lot of people say that the original cast is really shunted to the side in Toy Story 4, especially Buzz, but also many of the others are just sort of used in very token ways and not really figuring into the story or the plot or even the runtime much at all. And I totally get that to a certain degree too. And also the story of Toy Story 4 is just seen as far less timeless as any of the first 3 installments, so yeah, I get that criticism as well. But the big thing is that people just feel like it betrays the character of Woody and kind of ruins his character and betrays the bond he had with everyone and sort of the philosophy he had about sticking with your kid and always being there for Bonnie just like he was always there for Andy. But yeah, I don't know, it's a fraught film, so I see both sides of that coin, but it got 2 last place votes. Moving on. Lightyear with 4 votes for last.
I have several options. Summer Night, Ocean Paradise, Whale Calls.
No.
Lightyear is, for one thing, the only film within a film in the entire Pixar canon, so it's unique in terms of its premise, since it is the film that Andy saw when he was a little kid that made him want to have a Buzz Lightyear toy at all, which doesn't really track with the way that the film is made, because it just does not feel like a mid-90s action film, but whatever. It's very much a 2020s kind of awkward sci-fi family comedy.
Sucks. How long were we gone?
Meow, 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 meow. 22 years, 19 weeks, and 4 days.
It's not the worst film I've ever seen, certainly, and it's not my pick for worst on this list either, but Lightyear is, it's not what people expected at all, and it's certainly not the best film they've ever made by a long shot. And a lot of people were rubbed the wrong way by the recasting of the voice of Buzz, when it could have been either the original voice, Tim Allen, or perhaps Patrick Warburton, who did him in the cartoon on television. But it just, it's unfortunate that this film went the way that it did when it had so much potential, and it could have been a series if it had done really well, but they just didn't give us the big, high-flying space adventure that you kind of would have assumed that at least a first Buzz Lightyear film would be. I feel like this film might have been the second or even third in the series of a Buzz Lightyear film, and maybe you just have a very sort of more simple, back-to-the-basics, in-space actioner for the first film, and that makes sense that that's the one that got Child Andy into the franchise at all. And then maybe you have this sort of more thoughtful, time travel exploring sci-fi comedy, family heart film later on in the series, once the character of Buzz is really established and he's had some notable adventures in space to go on. So I think that they could have done Lightyear, and obviously it could still just be a better film in general, but I think they could have done Lightyear and it would have been a lot better received if it was the second or third film in the series, and if they'd done a really punchy first installment and just hit that 90s nostalgic feel and actually nailed that humor and that sort of wonderful simplicity that some 90s hits had. So anyway, this film is more than anything supremely disappointing to a lot of people, and so I see why it was at the bottom of 4 people's ranks. The next one up is one that I was honestly a little bit shocked to see get any last place votes, and it is, other than Luca, the one that I was most surprised overall got any, with 4 votes as well, just like Lightyear, is Brave.
And I'll be shooting for my own hand!
Brave is a film that I personally really enjoy, and I just find it super charming. It's not their best, and I think one thing that happened with Brave was that it came at the very tail end of Pixar's sort of golden age that most people have ending in around 2010 with the release of Toy Story 3, and sort of every film up until that point had been an absolute banger classic. Even Cars is still an incredibly wonderful film that would be one of the best pieces of storytelling and animation that came out of any other studio, and only looked a little bit less impressive in comparison to some of their other movies. But even then, every film basically up until Toy Story 3 in 2010 had been an absolute classic and a big hit, basically. And then Brave came out a couple of years after that, and was one of the first films where Pixar didn't get the absolute adulation of the critics, and it just was never accepted as like a classic. Certainly not at the time, and that reputation has sort of stuck with Brave, where it's just one of the lesser rung of Pixar films in most people's eyes, and it's also so Disney-ish, with Merida literally being a Disney princess in their official lineup on the merch, that it's just, it feels apart from all the other films in the kind of way that Lightyear does, where it's just, it's completely its own thing. That one in premise, this one in terms of feeling like a different studio's film, and also just feeling much more simplistic in its themes than a lot of the Pixar films from around that time. But it's cool. It's a lovely story, in my opinion, of mother-daughter love. And I guess there are aspects of the story that are sort of controversial in terms of how long she's a bear, how long they spent on the bear stuff, just the fact that there aren't really any musical numbers, but it kind of could be a musical. But the humor is a little hit or miss for people. There's a certain feeling to this film that didn't connect with the hardcore Pixar-loving audience for the most part. It has its champions, but it also has its people that think it's the absolute worst film they've ever put out, even below everything else that I'm about to discuss after this. And so, yeah, 4 people put Brave at the bottom, and it's just very Disney, very sort of simple meat and potatoes storytelling that some people get a bit bored with, and the humor and the storytelling choices are a little bit hit or miss for audiences in general. Next up, the last one with exactly 4 last place ranks is Turning Red.
I'm Maylin Lee, and ever since I turned 13...
Stop that!
Turning Red. What do I say about Turning Red? So I'm gonna spoil at least a tiny part of my own rank that I'll eventually do for the Pixar films. Turning Red is my pick for worst place. I am one of these 4 votes for last. And it's terrible, in my opinion. I just think this film is very, very poor.
Do you mind me asking why? I'll tell you why, because it's balls, that's why. Balls in what sense? Balls in the sense of balls.
So, one thing that always gets talked about with this film is how there's a relatability issue, which people basically use as an excuse to go easy on this film, or at least explain why they're critiquing it, or why they might not have connected with it. They sort of couch their criticism in this outside factor of relatability. They talk about how, well, it might be difficult to relate to this film. I'm not really this film's target audience because I'm not a young Asian girl in Toronto in 2002, who's a big fan of boy bands. Like, they get so specific. It's like, this film might not really be for you if you're not a young girl, or if you're not Asian, or if you're not into boy bands, or if you're not this or that or that. It's like, there was a time when Pixar films were meant to be for everybody, and they weren't aiming for a really specific demographic, and I'm completely okay with telling more culturally influenced stories, and it doesn't matter what I'm okay with, but I think obviously telling stories with a lot of culture is fabulous and a lot of personal touches, and I think something like Coco nailed that on the head so hard, and I think that they did such a fantastic job in terms of telling the story of a specific young boy with a specific dream and a specific family dynamic, and he's got a big connection to his culture. They explore the culture of Mexico, and they explore the culture of Dia de los Muertos, and so it can be done, and by Pixar. But Turning Red simply was not that, simply was not it, and furthermore, it has so many problems, but I just wanted to address that issue where a lot of people talk about how, well, this movie isn't really for me, or this movie isn't really for white men or adults or blah blah blah. It tires me so much that we can't just listen to people's opinions on something without sort of couching it in this language of like, well, I'm just a dumb white guy. Like, if the movie's good, the movie's good. I'm not a little Mexican boy living in the 1950s or whenever Coco is set, and so I say phooey at that argument. But basically, I wrote in the script here that not relatable to me seems to be, at least in relation to the film Turning Red, code for this movie is dog shit, but I don't want to sound mean or be accused of racism because I said that Turning Red is a piece of crap. Like, relatable to you or not, I believe that this movie is just garbage either way. And now I will tell you why, now that I've gone on that big tangent about how movies do not need to be relatable to you to be good or enjoyable to you. Obviously, that can help. That is a factor that can help and can help you connect to a character or a movie or a story or just a theme, but you don't need it. And if you connect to a story, even though you don't have much of a connection to the character or the setting or anything, then that shows that that film just has a wide reach. And we'll obviously connect in a different and special way with the people who have a personal connection, but it's, none of us are sentient toys, none of us are monsters, and yet we love the characters that are the main characters of those films because they're relatable. Truly relatable.
You're goddamn right.
So anyway, I think that this film genuinely has some very troubling and dangerous messaging for young people. I think that this film basically tells you to disobey your parents, and it displays such an incredibly toxic parent-child dynamic, and both the mother and the daughter in this film are just the worst. Like, the main character, May, is so incredibly annoying, and she just, she's the wrong side of irritating. She's just the worst. Like, none of the friends are really great, but she is by far, to me, the most objectionable character in basically the whole movie. She's just so irritating and makes all of these incredibly selfish, wrong decisions. Just, the mother is so... But at the same time, you can't blame her because the mother is so toxic, so cartoonishly toxic, and not in a good way. I know it's a cartoon movie, but the mother is just so insanely over the top, and I don't believe it, and the parts that I do believe, CPS should have been called a long time ago. And the fact that she just sort of attacks her daughter in public as a giant monster at the end, and there's not some sort of intervention by the law, there's not some sort of... It is just sending the wrong message all the way over. The fact that the movie ends with, and part of the climax of the movie is the minor protagonist shaking their ass at their mother, twerking in their mother's face, and saying, "What do you think of this, Mom? Ha ha, yeah, I have hormones." It's just...
What are you doing? Stop moving like that! Is this bothering you? Take it, Mom! Take it!
It's just beyond the pale, disgusting, and so sexualizing of minors, and I do not approve of it, and I think that there was some strange people working on Turning Red, and I just think that that movie is all sorts of messed up. Yeah, there's a lot else wrong with it too. I hate the art style. I think that it's one of the worst examples of the Pixar bean mouth style, and just so ugly. I don't like the anime influences. I think they took some of the worst tendencies from anime and actually turned them up rather than taking some of the more appealing aspects of anime animation. And so just Turning Red is, utter filth and garbage. That's what I think of that film. There's some okay elements, but overall, I don't like the story, I don't like the characters, I don't like the art, I don't like the music, and I do not like the themes one bit. Not one bit.
Wow, this is garbage. You actually like this?
Now that we're done with that one, we come to our top 3, which have a lot more votes progressively, in fact, almost by factors of 50% each time. Our next film of infamy, with 8 votes for last place out of the 72, was Cars 3.
Good morning, Mr. McQueen. Looking good.
Why?
So as anybody who knows anything about the Disney Pixar canon overall can tell you, Cars 2 is one of the most reviled films in the entire Pixar canon. But the interesting thing about that is when you look at a bunch of ranks, a lot of them will still pick Cars 3 as being worse than Cars 2. 8 of the people in this video, in fact, and there were probably a couple that chose other films as last and still had Cars 3 below Cars 2. But anyway, 8 that picked Cars 3 last overall. And really, when people put Cars 3 last, they often specifically say that it's the worst of the Cars movies and that Cars 2 isn't actually that bad, but Cars 3 is terrible because Cars 3 was an overcorrection from Cars 2, or at the very least, a course correction, if you want to argue overcorrection, whatever, but it was certainly a franchise course correction from Cars 2, where they basically ignored Cars 2 and just followed through from Cars to Cars 3 without any detours, seemingly. And so Cars 3 is a return to sort of the meat and potatoes, simple racing movie formula of the first, without as much of the emotional journey, although of course the emotional journey is that Lightning is aging out of the sport, and this is his last year, and he's just coping with that mentally, and trying to keep up physically and still compete this one last time, and he doesn't know it's going to be his last year at the beginning, but by the end it's clear that this is, it for him, probably as a professional racer, but it's a sweet story, and it's not perfectly done in my opinion, but, you've got the character of Cruz Ramirez, and there were a bunch of different endings. At the very least, there was one specific, quite different ending that they didn't use, And the one that they ended up going with is divisive, as any of the endings that they would have gone with for this franchise would have been, I think. I mean, you know, Lightning winning the race and having his last hurrah and glory moment would have been incredible, but I feel like a lot of people would have said, oh, that's a bit predictable and boring, even though that would have been extremely satisfying in its own way. But I feel like any ending to the Cars franchise, or trilogy, I should say, they'll probably make some more eventually, but any ending to the Lightning McQueen trilogy was going to be divisive in some way, just because people truly care about the character of Lightning McQueen, and I think that they gave a somewhat satisfactory ending to the character. I think it's okay. I love the last scene where he is Hudson Hornet purple. I think the Hudson Hornet colors on Lightning are so beautiful, and I just adore that last scene with him. But other than that, it's just sort of a bog standard late 2010s Pixar sequel where it's got a decent moral, it's got beautiful animation, it's got some fun sort of history of racing tied into it, it's got some really exciting sequences, it's got some silly humor, some good humor, some cringy humor, and yeah, it's got a very good performance in the lead from Owen Wilson as Lightning. Once again, he's a very, very dependable actor in the role, but it doesn't quite hit that sweet spot of Cars, and while I'm surprised it got this many votes for last, there is a contingent of the Cars franchise fans that are passionate that Cars 2 is not that bad, and most of these people seem to be equally passionate that Cars 3 is by far the worst Cars film, and that it completely neuters the end of Lightning's story, or that it's just not very good, and that it was bullshit that it ignored Cars 2, and that, yeah, it's just a bad movie. So there's a vocal minority of the Cars fandom specifically that hates Cars 3, and many who love it. Moving on, with the second most votes for last place, with 16, The Good Dinosaur. What can be said about The Good Dinosaur? It's... Once again, a little bit after Brave, but still in that era of Brave from the early to mid-2010s, where people were realizing that Pixar wasn't quite the creative powerhouse it used to be, that it wasn't going to be churning out hits or creative critical darlings like it used to every single time up to the plate. And The Good Dinosaur was one of those three nails in the coffin from Brave, Cars 2, and The Good Dinosaur, where these were the three films that were either really underperformed critically in terms of the usual Pixar standards, or really underperformed at the box office, as this one did. This was Pixar's first flop, famously. It was the first Pixar film to not make money at the box office, and that was massive news at the time because Pixar had maintained a critical darling streak for a very, very long time, but that was, of course, broken with Cars 2. But even then, Cars 2 was a smash hit because all the Cars films made money because it's Cars. But The Good Dinosaur was a flop, so even though it didn't get the worst reviews ever, and even though it does have its apologists, it lost the studio money, and it's not emphasized by the studio, and they seem a little bit embarrassed by it, frankly. Yeah, this was one of the films where people sort of saw God bleed in terms of Pixar as this perfect animation studio that can do no wrong. Well, they did wrong, eventually.
Tell me, do you bleed? You will.
And so why do people think that The Good Dinosaur is the absolute worst? At least a pretty sizable contingent of people. A lot of it has to do with the story and the animation style simplicity. The story, it's very simplistic. If, Cars 3 is bog standard 2010s Pixar storytelling, then The Good Dinosaur is the boggest of bog standard, where it's just a very simple emotional tale of a young protagonist. They've got the usual Pixar odd couple at the core of the story, these two characters that go on a journey together and have to learn to communicate and work together and form an emotional bond. Like, it's what Pixar does every single time. It's just the most standard and simple and, many would say, boring version of that dynamic that Pixar has made its bread and butter over the years. And it's, to me, fine. It's not the best movie ever. I don't think it's the worst movie ever. I enjoy a lot of parts of it every time I watch it, and I'm disappointed by parts of it every time I watch it too. I saw it in theaters, and I enjoyed it then, and I still think it's pretty okay. But there is a simplicity to the story where they just go on a journey. Arlo learns some lessons. They have the, obligatory Disney or Pixar death of a parent with his dad dying, and he has to face some scavenging dinosaurs. He becomes friends with this herd of T-Rexes that herd this cattle or something. Like they're these rancher, like cowboy T-Rexes. They're pretty cool. I do like the Sam Elliott T-Rex character. He is one of my favorite parts. But the voice acting doesn't absolutely stand out. People really didn't love the characters of Arlo or Spot. Arlo is by far one of the least popular Pixar lead characters, if not the absolute least popular. And so, yeah. And then, of course, there was the art style, which was very rounded, and not bean mouth, but very rounded and sort of cutesy and cartoony. And it was really in contrast with these gorgeously rendered, almost photorealistic backgrounds and nature scenes, and just plateaus and vistas and forests and all these gorgeous natural landscapes that Pixar had built for us visually. And then you've got these sort of goofy looking rounded big-eyed dinosaurs just clonking around the screen, and it's a little visually dissonant. I don't think they merged them very well at the end of the day, and so unfortunately this film does look literally uneven. But yeah, that's why a big number of people think it's the worst, because they don't like the storytelling, they don't like the main character, they do not like the visual styles clashing, and it was Pixar's first financial bomb, so it lives in infamy in that way forever too. And now on to the film with by far the most last place ranks of any film in this sample size, and far bigger of a percentage than any film got in the Disney version of this list as well, with 31 out of 72 votes, Cars 2. Oh, Cars 2.
I'm about to miss my flight.
Don't worry, I've taken care of that. Whoa! Hang on!
So, Cars 2. Why do people think Cars 2 is the worst Pixar film? Well, because it's the worst reviewed by far. It's easily the most reviled by the critics when it came out, and just in perpetuity, as evidenced by the enormous amount of critics from this list that put it as the worst. And it's a film that completely diverges from its original and changes the main character from Lightning McQueen to Mater, and people hate that. People have a very short leash in terms of their like or attention for Larry the Cable Guy and the character of Mater. And while I love Mater and love Larry the Cable Guy in general, yeah, I understand. I don't think Cars 2 is the absolute worst, obviously, because I think that's turning red, but Cars 2 is extremely goofy, perhaps the goofiest film in the Pixar canon. It's
What in the...
part racing film, mostly spy film, slapstick comedy that has this silly plot involving this all-in-all oil and these cars that are called lemons, and this international racing competition between different kinds of race cars that would have been really cool to see more of, and it's just a little bit confused as to what it wants to be. It's Cars, you know, as interpreted through the lens of John Lasseter's love for James Bond films, and so it's John Lasseter putting his two loves, automobiles and James Bond, together and just mixing them all up in his toy chest, and Cars 2 is what you get. So it's a fun watch if you are in the mood to watch Cars 2. If you are somebody who's never in the mood to watch Cars 2, then you might put it at the bottom, but it's got kind of a nothing story. It's just full of, you know, it's full of fluff. It's got these silly British spy characters interacting with Mater the whole time. Mater and Lightning have this sort of tense relationship the whole time just due to all these sort of weak misunderstandings. You really don't get much character development for anybody. Nothing in this movie carries forward into Cars 3, so it's completely ignored by its own franchise, and while it was a financial hit, this movie illustrates more than any other how important good, or at least decent, reviews are to Pixar as a studio, because they will ignore your film if you got bad reviews, even if it's part of a franchise that continues on. They'll cut you out like a redheaded stepchild. It's just right out of the will for you, Cars 2. But yeah, it's just a silly film with a lot of silly stuff happening in it, and if you don't vibe with it, and very few people do, it's really an acquired taste / a special taste. And if you really like Cars 2, or if you don't think it's the worst film in the Pixar franchise, then you probably don't like Cars 3 very much, and you might even think that Cars 3 is the very worst. 31 votes for last place for Cars 2, and I cannot say that I am shocked or surprised, and I get it. But moving on to the most mid, the films that didn't get any first or last place votes on anyone's rank. As I said earlier, this is the smallest of the 3 categories that we are looking at today, with only 6 films contained in it, 4 of which are follow-ups to other films. These 6 films are, in order of chronological release, A Bug's Life, Monsters University, Finding Dory, Incredibles 2, Onward, and Inside Out 2. Of these 6, I have to say that the one I was most surprised didn't get any first place votes was A Bug's Life.
No, I'm wrong. You're lower than dirt. You're an ant!
Because I just feel like that movie is so early in Pixar's history, and it is still seen as one of the absolute classics. It was the second film they ever released. It's just so great. It holds up so well today. The villain is an all-timer. And it was very, very high on some people's lists, definitely in a couple of top 5s, but it was really seen as one of the more middle-of-the-road films. Not really anywhere near anybody's bottom. I don't think it was really in anybody's bottom 5 much, but yeah, A Bug's Life kind of shocked me, but it's just seen as a standard Pixar film by most. It's seen as, with Cars, 2 of the weakest in the original era of films, from Toy Story all the way up to Toy Story 3. A Bug's Life and Cars often get cited as the 2 sort of not as all-time great films as that batch of original classics. But I love it, and I think that in years to come, maybe it'll become more beloved. I certainly don't see it becoming hated, so it's just a grand little film, and I like it a lot. Monsters University.
Okay, I'll lift the bed, you grab the pig. Ready?
What?
1,
No.
2,
No.
3!
Yeah, this makes sense that nobody would think that this was the absolute best, especially since it's a prequel, and, it's not nearly as beloved as the original film that we'll talk about in quite a while. But I love it. I think it's adorable, and I'm a little bit surprised that nobody put it absolute worst, because I just know that this film does have its haters, as it does have its absolute lovers, and some people think it's a wonderful allegory for disability and the realities of living life in the world when you can't absolutely do everything that you would have loved to do, at least in the way that you would have loved to do it. And for my part, I'm much more in the love camp. I think this is a brilliant film, and I believe it's in my top 10 Pixar personally, but we'll get to that someday. But never mind that now. But Monsters University, and I think honestly all of these 6 films to a degree are pretty much the definition of Pixar mid, which is a film that any other animation studio would have been absolutely proud to put out, and I'm certainly sure that Pixar is proud to have put out all 6 of these films, but that are seen as a bit more middle-of-the-road quality-wise than any of the other ones. Finding Dory.
Dory?
Ahoy there! Do you want to play hide and seek?
Is another one that, again, is sort of an inferior follow-up to one of the original classics, just like Monsters University is in terms of people's perceptions of it. Finding Dory has actually been retroactively criticized some of the most of any of the films on this list, along with the next film, Incredibles 2. So Finding Dory and Incredibles 2 came out in that sort of mid to late 2010s era where Pixar was starting to do a lot more sequels, and those sequels were mostly doing really well financially and critically, but that people were sort of looking back on and saying, well, that actually didn't really hold up to the quality of the storytelling of the original and didn't really hold up to the spirit of the original as much, and was just kind of a sequel for sequel's sake and sequel for box office's sake. And I see both sides of it. I do see the merit in both of these films, more so Incredibles 2 than Finding Dory, but still I think they're both decent movies. But I get that, yeah, there's been some sort of retroactive backlash to these movies. They're also, their critical numbers were fudged a bit. If you look at the, Rotten Tomatoes scores for these movies, and Rotten Tomatoes is full of crap, and I'll get into that in a future video. They are absolute hucksters and frauds and con men, but...
Liar! Liar! Liar!
The Rotten/Fresh scores for both of these movies being like around or over 90%, just like most Pixar classics are, that's very, very, very misleading, and I really doubt that 9 out of 10 people like Finding Dory and Incredibles 2 that have seen them. So, yeah, They're both just sort of seen as the inferior follow-ups. Both of them are seen as lazy in their own ways. People really don't love the story of Dory as much as they love the story of Looking for Nemo. Some people find it quite sweet, and some people just think it's a bit too kiddie, and the stuff in the aquarium isn't as great as the open ocean stuff in Nemo, which I would agree with. And then for Incredibles 2...
Num num cookie, cha-cha, num num cookie, cookie.
People absolutely despise the villain, Evelyn Dever, and they don't like the twist. They don't think, it's a well-crafted film overall. They didn't like that they waited all those years for this film that had a pretty simplistic kind of rehash villain of the first, but just sort of a pale imitation. I get those critiques. I still enjoy this movie because I think it's got a fabulous aesthetic, fabulous score, an okay enough story that strings together some amazing action sequences and animation sequences. I love the character work they do with all of these characters. I know that a lot of people have problems with the characterization of Bob Parr both ways. Some people feel like he was emasculated, some people feel like he became kind of whiny and not supportive enough of Helen. I think they actually struck a good balance with all the characters where Helen gets to do a bunch of the action stuff, Bob has his own thing going on, and he's a hero of a different sort for most of the runtime. I just think it's fun, especially since we did get so much of Bob being the hero in the original. I think it's cool to see him take on the domestic role and struggle with it, but also succeed in lots of ways too. And just being a dad's hard. Being a dad to 3 kids is hard, and being a dad to 3 superpowered kids is damn near impossible, especially when your wife is at work. And so, he struggles because it is a struggle, because parenting is a struggle no matter what. And so I think that Incredibles 2 has some fabulously funny and relatable stuff in there and great character work, even if it is let down a bit by the villain. But definitely I see why it's one of the most mid in the franchise by many people, and nobody put it number 1. And I'm a little bit surprised nobody put it number, last, because a lot of people absolutely hate this movie. It was in some second to last and third to last places, I can tell you that. It came very, very close out of these 6 to getting a last place vote, but Incredibles 2 just skirted that dishonor by the skin of its whiskers. Now, the last 2 films on this little mini list, Onward.
You can't cast a levitation spell on something that far away. It only has like a 15-meter enchanting radius.
Was another one that, again, I think this was another perfect example of late 2010s, just like very, or maybe it was 2020s. Yeah, late 2010s, early 2020s. Sort of, again, standard, reliable, but not blow you away Pixar storytelling, where it's a decent film with a decent premise and a decent cast and decent humor and decent visuals, and everything's good and decent and fine, but none of it really absolutely grabs you and says, like, wow, this is one of the all-time great films. There's no first 15 minutes like there is for Up or the relationship between Carl and Russell. There's no, sequence of Jessie's song When She Loved Me, and then the airport sequence at the end and Stinky Pete. There's no opening hour of Wall-E that's mostly a silent film. There's nothing about this film and its artistic choices, Onward, that just grabs you and says, I am making a bold choice. This is me. I am Onward. There's nothing in this. It's just a very safe sort of rounded edges film. Even the designs of the characters are very soft and rounded edges. There's nothing that can cut you here. There's nothing that can piss you off too much, but there's also nothing that can get you too excited about it either. So it's just a fine little film, a decent little film, a film that I never mind watching, a film that I always enjoy, and there's parts that I enjoy very, very much. And I even like the main characters quite a bit, and the character of the dad, at least the legs of him, is real sweet. And for the most part, the journey and the characters and the relationship work for me, even though I have mixed feelings about the ending. It's one of those endings that just kind of has to work for you or it doesn't. But overall, yeah, Onward to me might be my pick for most mid Pixar film of all. It is absolutely middle of the road. It's not bad. It's not that great. It's good, but I think the average Pixar movie is good. But maybe just good at this point because of all the kind of mid movies that they've put out over the years. But yeah, Onward for me would probably sit really near smack dab in the middle of my ranking, and it's fine, But nobody put it last, nobody put it first. And finally, Inside Out 2.
Orange? Who made the console orange?
Do I look orange?
I didn't touch it.
Orange is not my color.
Not me.
The most recent, I believe it came out last year. It was a $1 billion film last year. In fact, the highest grossing animated film of all time by total box office, if I'm not mistaken. And I think it's a fine film. In fact, I think it's the one of these 6 films, along with maybe A Bug's Life, that might someday start topping lists a little bit and being people's absolute favorite. Maybe Monsters University as well. But yeah, Inside Out 2 is a fabulous film. And in my opinion, it's right up there with the original in terms of quality. I think both of the original Inside Out and Inside Out 2 are absolute banger films. I think they're 2 of the best films that modern post-2010 Pixar has ever come out with. They're both fabulous in their own ways, and Inside Out 2 not only was a huge financial hit, but critics did love it. They really, really adored it. They didn't heap quite as much universal praise on it as they did on the original, because the original is seen as an absolute, an absolute modern Pixar classic 10 years on from its release today. It's seen as the absolute peak of what, Pixar's been able to achieve in the last few years, the original Inside Out. But Inside Out 2, I think, 10 years down the line, in 2034, from when it was released, it might also have that reputation of being an absolute modern Pixar classic, just like the original. I think that it just may have to have its legend grow, but people really loved it, obviously, by the box office take. And I can see why. It's just a lovely film. It's a really great exploration of anxiety and nervousness and panic attacks and, wanting to fit in and wanting to make friends and changing who you are, certain aspects of who you are to fit other people's perceived notion of what is cool and what is in and what is desirable and attractive. And Riley's struggle is just so universal, so relatable, but at the same time so personal to her, and it's so well told and well crafted. I think it's fabulous, and to me, I think why I prefer Inside Out 2 over Inside Out a little bit myself is that I feel like Riley is more of a full character in this film, whereas the first film I felt was much more about the emotions, and Inside Out 2 is a little bit more about Riley and who she is really turning out to be. And so I think that Inside Out 2, like Inside Out, will start to top some number 1 ranks in years to come. Yeah, I'm calling it now. Anyway, with that all out of the way, with all of the last place votes and the non-voted films done, let's go on to all of the films that had at least 1 vote for Best Pixar Film of all time. This is the largest category we are looking at today by quite a bit, as a total of 15 different films in the 28-film large Pixar canon received at least 1 vote for Best of All Time in ranks across the interwebs and my personal acquaintances. And so these 72-ish votes were spread much wider than the votes for Worst Film, and the percentages are quite a bit more split. So let's get into it. First up in this category are 3 films that got exactly 1 vote for first place. Starting with the film that started our votes for worst place, with 1 first place rank as well, it's Luca.
Gravity, also known as falling!
Now, Luca is, again, the only film we're discussing twice this video, and similar to Meet the Robinsons, it was the best for one person and the worst for another, and it's the most, I guess you could say, divisive film in the Pixar canon. It's the anti-mid. You either love it or you hate it, or some of you think it's mid too. Like, it's just a film that can get ranked all over the spectrum of Pixar rankings. I will say, however, other than the person that put it absolute worst, there were very few that put it that low. Most of them had it around mid-list or a bit higher, and a lot had it in the top 10 and even 5, and 1 put it number 1. So Luca is, in my opinion, a lovely little film. I think it's, of the films that have used the Pixar bean mouth style, it's the one that used the bean mouth style the best, in my opinion, and while I don't absolutely love that sort of rounded animation style that they went with for all of these recent films, like Elio and Turning Red, here it's alright to me. I think this is the best usage of it, and I think it's honestly pretty cute overall. And I think that the story of Luca is lovely and sweet, and it doesn't all work absolutely perfectly for me, but I quite like it, of especially the recent Pixar output. It's one of my absolute favorites. It's a cute, sweet, simple little story, and it's meat and potatoes in a good way. It's just the simple building blocks of a nice little emotional story. It's got a good hook. It's got lovely characters, and it's all about friendship and just living your life, doing what you want, having fun, and yeah, having a good summer with your friends. It's a nice movie. What can I say? Elemental got 1 vote for first place.
Hey, Fern! How you doing?
Living the dream.
And Elemental is another one of the very recent films that did a lot better on the streaming service, Disney+. But Elemental is just... it's a lovely little film again. I certainly don't hate it. A lot of people really dislike it. It's in quite a few bottom 5s, although nobody gave it an absolute last place. But it got 1 first place, and it's getting a growing number of top 5 and top 10 placements. It's one of those films that I think its reputation will get a lot better over the years. It wasn't the film that people were really expecting. I think some people thought it was going to be much more woke than it was, when really it's got some immigration sort of themes. It's got some cross-cultural themes. It's a romantic film. It's a film about emotions. It's a film about, it's a movie with a lot of different things going on in its story, while it is also fairly simplistic in a lot of ways, and in a lot of, I think, good ways. It gets to the basics of Pixar's character design again, where every film had really unique character designs and a really unique type of lead character. The characters here are elements, whereas in the original, few Pixar films, they were toys and bugs and monsters and fish and superheroes and cars, and it was all these sorts of different bodied beings, but they all went through the same sort of emotional struggles to connect with others around them and live a good life. And I think that Elemental hit that note for me of the original series of Pixar doing these very different kinds of lead characters, both physically and often emotionally. And it's also one of their only romances. I think it might be their first full romantic film that the entire thing was sort of centered on a love story between 2 characters. I really love the ending scene of Wade crying his way back into existence. I think it's absolutely sweet. There's something about this movie that I really like. I really connect with it, and it's not my absolute favorite, but I see why it got 1 first place vote, and I think it's a film that people will get a lot more fond of as the years go on. The third film that got exactly 1 first place rank was the original Cars.
I thought you said you'd never come back.
Well, I really didn't have a choice. Mater didn't get to say goodbye.
Goodbye!
And I absolutely can see why here. Cars is just, it's a film that if you were a Cars kid, you were a Cars kid. That's why this film is still to this day, I think, Pixar's biggest moneymaker in terms of merch, even beyond Toy Story, because Cars sells. Cars freaking sells, dude. There's something so insanely hype about the first few minutes of Cars. That real gone, just like that incredible soundtrack, just those revs, just in the darkness, hearing Lightning's voice, seeing the track back and forth, darkness and the track and just the zooming cars. It gets you into the moment. You feel like you're at a race when you start the original Cars. It's one of those movies that can instantly transport you into that atmosphere. You get excited. It raises your heartbeat. Like, that is a pulse-pounding film and a pulse-pounding sequence. I really, really like Cars. I think that for all its flaws and for all the weirdness of the world building and for all the simplicity of the story and the sort of predictable nature of it, it is a really well done film in some ways. It knows how to grab you and just hold on until the end. It's got an incredible soundtrack. I think the Life is a Highway version is so truly iconic, honestly, and that scene of Lightning going down the highway to the song is actually just really, really great, beautiful, beautiful sort of vision of America passing by. And the themes of Americana and sort of a world that has passed by, the small town sort of neighborly feel of the country. It's a film that a lot of people can relate to in terms of a feeling of wistfulness and nostalgia and longing for a past that may never return. And it's a gorgeous film. It's very melancholy, and I think it has more on its mind than a lot of people give it credit for because it's just a silly Cars movie. But Cars is really something special. I'm a bigger fan of Cars than I realized now just talking about it, but I see why it got a first place rank. It's great. Next up, with 2 first place ranks, is Toy Story 3. Now this one's interesting because when I was going into this project, I would have actually predicted Toy Story 3 to be one of the contenders for most votes for first place, because people really love Toy Story 3. People talk about Toy Story 3 as if it's their absolute favorite. It's the best Pixar film of all time, and I certainly do not agree with that. I think it's a bit overrated in my opinion. It's a fine film, but, you know, not my absolute favorite. But yeah, only 2 people out of about 72 polled, and that really says something to me, that while it is a beloved film, it's not nearly beloved on the level that the original is, and we will get to the original Toy Story in a while. But yeah, I think that the belovedness of this film might be slightly overstated, but, you know, still 2 first place votes. But people think it's the best because it's got, in some people's opinion, a very, very good continuation of the first 2 stories. It's the conclusion of the Andy saga, the Andy trilogy, and it has a very sort of sweet, definitive ending to the journey of these toys with Andy at the end of the film, and people really respond emotionally to that ending and absolutely love it. And the ending of Toy Story 3 is kind of like the beginning of Up in terms of how legendary a part it is of the film overall. And also the Sunnyside stuff is just fun. The prison break feel of the film. It's a fun movie. It's a fun, breezy film, while also having an enormous amount of emotion packed throughout, and especially into the end. And I think the voice performances are fantastic. I think Michael Keaton steals so many scenes as Ken. And Warren Beatty is pretty good as Lotso Huggenbear. I'm not as much in love with Lotso as a villain as a lot of people are, but a lot of people think Lotso is one of the absolute best Pixar villains, and he's very, very good. And yeah, people adore the way that this film wraps up the trilogy, the dump scene, the ending with Bonnie and Andy. It's a sweet, sweet story. It's a sweet conclusion to a trilogy, and I see why it gets a couple of first place votes here. Another film with 2 votes for first place was Coco.
What did he say to you?
He was just showing me his guitar.
Shame on you! He wants no part of your music, Mariachi. You keep away from him.
Coco is one of the most recent films to enter the sort of stratosphere level of Pixar classic. It's from 2017, I believe, and from the moment this film came out, people thought that it was very special, and people really connected with the story. It's a gorgeously animated film. Miguel is a great lead character. It's got a pretty effective twist at the end, actually. It's got a fabulous villain. It's got really incredible music. Even better than its animation is the music, I would argue. It's a great film about family, about sort of generational trauma, about music, about death, about the bonds that we have with family even when they are not of this world anymore, the way that we remember people. It's a gorgeous film about memory and about love, about the relationships we have with people when they are gone, and the ways that they live on for us and in us. So Coco is a fabulously beautiful film in so many ways, and I totally get why it got a couple of first place ranks. Monsters, Inc. is next with 3 first place votes.
Kids asleep. Twins and a bunk bed.
This is another one of the classics. This one is just on the Pixar Mount Rushmore almost, in terms of those early ones that just sort of set the studio apart from anybody else and said, here we are Pixar, and this is what we can do. And this was also a huge step forward in the animation in terms of the fur simulation, being able to do all of those individual hairs falling off of Sully at once. It's just the way that he moves, the way that they put this stuff together in their animation engines and the programs they wrote for the hair was just revolutionary, beyond revolutionary at the time. It was some of the most mind-blowing animation we'd ever seen done with a computer, and it still holds up today as a really beautifully done film visually.
It's beautiful.
Beyond that, what this film has going for it is an amazing story and an incredible pair of lead characters and cast of characters overall. Everybody in this film is so memorable. Both villains, both lead characters, Boo, Celia, they're all just great. Roz, of course, steals the film. But it's just, the story is so timeless, it's such a wonderful hook. What if the monsters in our closet were scaring us for a reason? What does the monster in the closet want? What is their motivation? That's such a simple yet silly yet intriguing question. I just absolutely adore the hook of this film, and the way that they're this corporation that harvests screams. It's just so silly and it works so well. And the lead performances from John Goodman and Billy Crystal are all-timers. Their chemistry is out of this world. What a great pair. What a great odd couple. What a wonderful pair of friends to show on screen. Pixar does friendship so well, and this is one of those times where they are showing a really well-established, long-running friendship, and these two actors created just instant, immediate chemistry with each other, and it lights up the screen every moment that they're talking. And Boo is so wonderful. She's just one of the best Pixar kid characters of all time. So adorable. And she's, of course, the entire hinge point of the Pixar theory, so she has that importance as well. But yeah, Monster Inc.
Here's Tom Hanks!
Gets 3 votes for first place, and it deserves them. And in fact, I am surprised it actually didn't get more, but what an all-time classic film. The next pick, also with 3 first-place ranks, was Soul.
Is it H-E double hockey sticks?
Hell.
I believe Soul is the most recent film released to get any first-place ranks at all, being only a few years old at the recording of this video. The younger generation art snobs pick, I would sort of classify it as. This is the successor to Ratatouille for that particular title, because Ratatouille sort of held its distinction as the art snobs pick of Pixar films to be ranked as number 1, but now Soul has sort of joined its ranks, with it being a little bit to music as Ratatouille is to food. So, yeah, I like Soul quite a bit, and I get it. Its art style is definitely distinct, while quite rounded. It's definitely not bean mouth, and they did a lot of really great work, especially on the human character models when they are on Earth. Like, Joe's character model's great. He's a really nice looking character in character design. I like his nose, I like his hair, I like the way that they made his body. It's just, he moves in a really fun, interesting, funny way. He's got a great physicality to him, and honestly, I just wish that we saw more of Joe. I do a little bit agree that maybe a little bit too much of the film took place in the afterlife, but also, I don't know, it's a bit of an uneven film in my opinion. It's another Odd Couple Pixar film, and it's got a lot of big, lofty questions about the universe and about consciousness and about the afterlife that it's exploring, and the before life and just life in general, existence. And it's interesting. I don't think that it bats 1,000. I don't think that it does everything it's trying to do perfectly, or even close to perfectly. It's an interesting film. It's a film, once again, like Onward, that I always enjoy watching, but I don't think that it has any one sequence that just grabs me like, again, a lot of other films do. The In the Zone sequence is pretty great, but it's great. It's very good. I get why people love it. It hits a certain type of film fan in just the right place, especially people who really love music, but just who really love this type of feeling of film where it's just this wonder and this questioning and this sort of like asking things about interesting ideas and like pondering film, while at the same time being a little bit of a silly comedy. It's sort of a fun comedic side character pursuing our heroes the whole time, but yeah. Soul's not my absolute favorite, but I get it. The next film with exactly 3 first-place ranks, there are quite a few in this category, was Inside Out.
We love our girl. Oh, she's got great friends and a great house. Okay, not what I had in mind.
So Inside Out was, in 2015, sort of heralded as a return to form for Pixar animation, because they'd had the trifecta of sort of either critical or financial bombs in Brave and The Good Dinosaur and Cars 2 especially. And so Inside Out was seen as a big return to form, and it had a great cast of original characters. They'd done the same thing that they'd always done in the 2000s and 90s, where they took a concept and personified it, this time with literal emotions. You know, what if toys had feelings? What if monsters had feelings? What if cars had feelings? What if grumpy old men flying houses had feelings? And what if feelings had feelings? This film was kind of the we put a car in your car so you can drive while you drive exhibit Pimp My Ride meme of Pixar films. What if feelings had feelings? But that being said, Inside Out is a very good film. It's just a fabulous ride. It's very zany and breezy, and it's got a really great sense of humor. The main cast of characters is really excellent, and I also love Riley. I love her even more in the sequel, as I explained earlier, but Riley's a really, really good central character around which to hinge this franchise. She is interesting and complex and sympathetic and sweet and likable and moody, obviously, and just interesting. She's a real interesting, complex gal, and I like her. And I think sadness and joy, especially sadness, are just such fabulous Pixar, classic Pixar feeling characters. They're another great odd couple that go on a journey together, and overall, I get it. The original Inside Out is really, really dang good. And finally, the last one we'll discuss with exactly 3 first-place ranks is Toy Story 2.
Here's our chance. Ready, set, go! Drop!
So the second installment in the Toy Story franchise gets one more first place rank than Toy Story 3 got. Toy Story 3 got 2, Toy Story 2 gets 3. That's kind of funny. But Toy Story 2 is just, it's seen as obviously Pixar's greatest sequel by quite a mile. And other than Toy Story 3, it's the only Pixar sequel to get first place votes. So it's the only direct sequel to get first place votes. And it's just got everything. It's got a fabulous story. It's got great things for the characters of the original to do. It's got fantastic new addition characters to the plot. It's got one of the best Disney villains of all time in Stinky Pete, and then another one of them in Al, of Al's Toy Barn. And it's got Jerry from Jerry's Game as the toy restorer. It's got so many classic sequences, including that Woody restoring scene that just sweep you up in the story.
Oh, thank goodness you're here.
Is the specimen ready for cleaning?
Of course, When She Loved Me scene that absolutely breaks everybody's heart. It's got the chase at the airport. It's got so many classic scenes, so many classic characters. The exploration of Woody's past, the Woody's Roundup scenes are heartbreaking. The journey through Al's Toy Barn with all of the Barbies is so funny. Just everything that Buzz gets to do, everything that Woody gets to do, everything in this film is fabulous. And so people really responded to it. It's easily Pixar's most celebrated sequel other than Toy Story 3. But the Toy Story trilogy as a whole is just so revered and celebrated and loved, and I completely get why. And Toy Story 2 is an enormous part of that legacy. And this film famously was almost released just a direct-to-video thing, much cheaper production until they upgraded it. It was almost lost, and then it was backed up on somebody's home computer that they eventually fired decades later. But this film had all sorts of things going on in its production, and yet it still managed to come out this perfect. That is truly one of the greatest cinematic success stories of all time. So Toy Story 2 earns its first place ranks.
And you have earned the new puppy that's coming with us to the White House.
And now after that, we have a film with 4 first place ranks, Up.
Go on.
So Up is an interesting little film. It's another classic Pixar odd couple film, and it's the film where people always say that the first 15 minutes are the best part, and a lot of people say it's overrated because the first 15 minutes drag the film up, and that the rest of the film is not actually as good, and it's a little weird and disappointing if you actually watch it, but I'm of the mind that Up is an all-time great. It's got such a silly, zany story. Once again, it's a very silly premise, like Monsters, that they just make work emotionally. It's this man who, wanted to go on this journey with his wife all his life. His wife finally has passed away. They never had any children like they would have liked to, but they had this beautiful life that was this wonderful love story and adventure together. And at the end of their lives, she's gone, and he has this house that is about to be taken away from him. He's about to be taken away to an old folks home, and he's just still that same little boy at heart, and he shows it by putting a bunch of his balloons from work tied to the top of his home and floating away through the sky, and inadvertently taking a little Boy Scout named Russell with him. But it's just A beautifully simple and silly premise that is plumbed for all sorts of emotional depth, and it's got so many lessons about aging and about the process of letting go and about regret and learning to move on from death and learning to move on from tragedy and making the best of your life and just living each day with joy and forming new bonds later in life. Never meeting your heroes is another big theme of this. It's a gorgeous film. It's got so many beautiful and beautifully explored themes, and I love it more every time I watch it, honestly. It's one of those that I just think is an absolute masterpiece, and I love the visual style. The character design of Carl is incredible. You know, he's a square face for the square man. He just is the most square dude, and he's adorable for that. And Ellie is such a gorgeous contrast to him. Russell is so squishy. Russell is just the squishiest, squishy little boy. It's fantastic. I love Up. Well-earned votes. Next, we have a film with 6 first-place ranks, Finding Nemo.
I hate you.
So, the interesting thing about Finding Nemo, beyond the fact that it is a wonderful film and that it's one of the, again, original sort of Mount Rushmore films in the original streak of Pixar critical and financial hits, but the thing that I noticed over and over about this film is that this is the father's pick. This is the father's favorite, and at least 4 or 5 of the 6 first place ranks that it got were due specifically to men who were fathers who said that they really connected to this film because of the fact that they had kids themselves, and it made it one of the most emotional films in their life. Which includes specifically the reviewer Sean Chandler. He talked about that aspect of the film and why it hits him so hard, but I noticed him saying it, and then as I went through a bunch of other ranks, I noticed a bunch of other men saying it as well, and there was at least one woman who ranked this as their #1 film, but mostly it was guys, and it was guys who were dads, like Sean, who just found this to be an incredibly emotionally affecting film. And I get why. It's one of the most beautiful tales of parenthood, fatherhood I could think of in cinema, honestly. It's so beautifully animated. The water is, a character unto itself. The ocean is absolutely a character in this film. It's one of the most impressive, again, like Monsters, feats of animation in the canon where they were able to take such a leap forward in terms of just everything they did with the ocean visually. The fish, the way they move, the way the water moves, how much light you can see in the water, how fuzzy things look even though they're very, very close to you, how small something looks far away in the ocean. It's just brilliantly done visually. I really like the finale of the film. The finale of the film is very emotional. It's one of those movies that just hits hard. And it's got, again, a classic odd couple pairing in the lead that people really respond to with Dory and Marlon. And so it's one of those movies that, it just hits your feels real hard. So a well-earned 6 first place ranks. The next 2 films got 8 votes apiece for first place, the first of which we will discuss being The Incredibles.
This is Sean.
That's fine.
I mean, I can break through walls, I just can't.
That's fine.
Get this on.
So, The Incredibles is one of those films that only seems to grow in appreciation as we get further and further from it. It was obviously beloved at the time. It's another kind of Mount Rushmore film. All 4 of the last 4 films that we're discussing here, again, are all just kind of Mount Rushmore Pixar films, the ones that people hold among the classics of the classics, obviously. But The Incredibles was the first film they did that focused primarily on human characters, because Toy Story and Toy Story 2 is obviously mostly about the toys, but The Incredibles, the humans are the characters, and the twist is that they're supers. And it's just a classic. It's a classic superhero film. It's a classic animation film. It's certainly a classic Pixar film. It's a classic family movie. It's just a really great action film. It's got a lot of James Bond influence, and unlike in Cars 2, according to a lot of people, the James Bond influence really works here and adds a lot to the world, and it's a real comic book that never existed come to life. It's just a fabulous film to get caught up in. While I don't really love all of the themes, and there's a lot of nuance with the themes that are being presented, and there's a lot of arguments both ways as to how those themes should really be interpreted and what was really meant by the sort of idea of supers being somehow intrinsically better, and the way that they explore that with the question of Dash competing, it's strange. It's a film that has a lot to say, and I'm not sure it says it all perfectly, But from a story level, in terms of having a great villain and being a great superhero film and family film and comedy and action film, it's aces. It's fantastic. It's a 10 out of 10 for all of those aspects. It's just theme-wise, it's always been a little bit fraught to me. But the action, the music, the character designs, the character dynamics, the writing, the dialogue, just the pacing, everything in this film is fabulous. Lucius steals the show.
Honey!
What?
Where's my super suit? What? Where is my super suit?
The whole family is great. They're all wonderful characters. The voice acting is just Jason Lee as Syndrome. Wow, what a villain Syndrome. It's just one of those films that's just chef's kiss in terms of so many of the technical aspects and the ways that it is put together as an entertaining piece of popcorn blockbuster entertainment. It is really flawless in so many of those ways. And of course, the animation was a huge step forward once again. So 8 first place votes, great job, The Incredibles. And speaking of 8, we have another film with that many with Ratatouille.
Which would go nicely with a bottle of Cheval Blanc 1947. Tell him to hit me with his best shot.
So as I noted a few minutes ago, Ratatouille is the film that is sort of the older art snob's pick for Best Pixar Film, and Soul has overtaken it a little bit these days, but Ratatouille is the film that is just about art. It's just the film that's in love with the artistic process, the artist's dream, the artists themselves. It's a film about food, it's a film about Paris, it's a film about creativity, it's about a genius being able to sprout from any background. It's about absolutely anybody possibly having the potential to be a genius at something, to be the best in the world at something, or among the very best. And I personally find that to be an incredible theme. It's almost the opposite of the theme of Monsters University, where that one sort of try as you might never be the best at what you want to do, and Ratatouille doesn't completely flip that on its head, but it's sort of the opposite, where it's like, you might not know what it is, but you are probably at least somebody with the potential to be the best at something. And for Remy, he had the potential to be one of the finest chefs in all the world, even though he is simply a humble rat that comes from lowly beginnings of sniffing food to see if it's poisoned. But Remy has a gift, and he explores that gift. He has a passion. He goes up against the dogma of his culture and of his family, and he fights for what he wants. And, you know, he has struggles. He gives in to temptation. You know, he betrays his friends to feed his family at one point. He develops this wonderful friendship with Linguini. And once again, it's a classic Pixar odd couple that I adore. Remy and Linguini are just such a fabulous pair. I love all of the side characters. The French accents are hilarious, as much as they are a bit silly. They're just so much fun. This film is such a love letter to so many things, but especially the process of art and the very idea of art and its creation, and then, of course, its critique. And the film comes at art critique in such a nuanced and intelligent and mature way that I'm not sure if they'd even be capable of writing these days in terms of the subtlety, but it's just such a nuanced take on both sides of the coin of art versus critique of said art, and I just love it. Yeah, Ratatouille is a fabulous film, and it deserves these votes. And now we come to the final two, the two films that were neck and neck as I was finishing this list in terms of top vote getters for first place ranks, and while ultimately one of them prevailed over the other with one more vote, 12-13, this was indeed a head-to-head race between these two films during essentially the entirety of the compilation of this list. So without further ado, with 12 first place votes, WALL-E. So why do people think WALL-E is the best Pixar film? Well, this is the film that is called over and over and over again in both reviews of it specifically and also ranks of these films that I watched for this, Pixar's masterpiece. People see this as the culmination of Pixar's artistry, of their high art concepts, and the fact that it sort of has much better aged animation than the film that I'm about to talk about after it, which you've probably, by process of elimination, guessed. WALL-E sort of hits that sweet spot of being later enough in the Pixar timeline chronologically to have really fantastic looking CG animation, even still today. From its release in the late 2000s, it still has gorgeous looking animation even today in the mid-2020s, but it also has that maturity of the old classic Pixar era's golden age storytelling. It's got the heart that the classic golden age of Pixar provided every single time. It's got a great, again, odd couple at the middle of the film with Wall-E and Eve. It's got a very sweet love story. I guess this is the other film other than Elemental that has a love story right at the middle of it. I spoke too soon when I talked about Elemental, but I don't think of that as being the point of Wall-E, even though it is a huge part of it. The romance between Wall-E and Eve is a big part of it, and it's very, very sweet. But I see it much more as being a film about environmentalism, being a film about relying too much on AI and technology, being a film which is very relevant right now, and just being a film all about sort of the human experience. And while robots may indeed be lovely sentient creatures sometimes, as Wall-E and Eve are, and there's nothing inherently wrong with robots or artificial intelligence, the sort of core of the message is that the human experience is so important and that we need to protect the planet because, our relationship with it is key. And if we abandon it, or if it abandons us, that's bad news for everybody. It's got a lot to say about just living your life one day at a time, doing the real things that you want to do, not being too caught up in a virtual world, being physical, being mobile, not allowing yourself to just completely slacken and let yourself go, either mentally or physically. It's a film about effort, and it's a film about trying, it's a film about caring, and it's a film about love, too, and love blossoming and life blossoming even in the face of all odds. The love between two artificially intelligent robots being very, very real. There being real emotion there, and I think that that's an incredibly worthwhile story to tell, so I see why Wall-E is perceived as such an absolute modern classic and masterpiece, and I see why it got its 12 first-place ranks. And now, finally, we come to the granddaddy of all Pixar films. The very first, the original, and the film that gets the most first-place ranks in this sample size, with 13, Toy Story.
Quick, make a space! This is where the spaceship lands! And I press the back...
Hello?
Oh, yeah!
Ah! Whoa! Hey, whoa!
So, why is Toy Story from 1995, great year, still seen as pretty definitively the Pixar film? The best, the original, and the still to be topped. Well, it's just one of those movies, isn't it? It's just perfect.
It was perfect. Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
Even with the dated animation, even with the fact that it's the very first fully computer animated film of all time, and obviously there are a lot of seams showing 30 years on, it's just timelessly fantastic. It's both completely of its era, the mid-90s, and kids of that age playing with toys like we did back then, but it's just fabulous. It's just so great. Every scene is a classic scene. The Pizza Planet sequence, the whole beginning with You've Got a Friend in Me, the aesthetics of the room, all of the toy designs, the brilliance of writing a story about toys, meaning you can then sell those toys to the kids who see the movie. My gosh, what marketing gold! But it doesn't feel cynical. It feels completely earned that this story is about toys, because these toys are real people. Woody is so real. Buzz is so real. Everybody is so incredibly, wonderfully real. Mr. Potato Head and Rex and just Ham and all of them. Bo, they're all such fabulous characters. Slinky, my gosh. Jim Varney of all. Oh, love me some Jim Varney, my gosh.
Hey, Vern, look what I found in my daddy's closet. I bet you this is from the big one. WW2. Vern, this must be some kind of a cigarette lighter.
It's got an incredible cast. Andy's a great character. Andy's mom is a great character. It's got maybe Pixar's best duo at the center of it with Woody and Buzz. It's got this wonderful, unlikely friendship blossoming. Absolutely all-time music. Randy Newman outdid himself. This might be his most iconic score or music for a movie at all. It just instantly transports you. It's a classic in every sense of the word. It makes you feel like you're watching it for the first time every time you watch it because you just remember the first time you watched it. It's that level of great. I might not even say that it is my number one, but it is undeniably an all-time classic. It's the first film that I ever saw in my entire life, by the way. When I was a baby, I was taken to Toy Story before any other film. First movie I ever saw, so I have a special connection with it as well, but it just is. It just is. Great villain, great music, great characters, great themes, just not even just great, all-time classic, wonderful, almost impossible to top in every single category, and an incredibly exciting and dynamic ending with the moving truck and the rocket. Wow, the fact that the rocket comes back, everything about the rocket is just like, oh, it's such good storytelling. It's so satisfying. I love it to bits. It is Toy Story, and it deserves its 13 first place ranks. It's a banger. And that is it. That is all 72 opinions on what is the absolute best and what is the absolute worst Pixar film. And as promised, I am going to read off the online names or affiliated publications that published all of the ranks that I took samples from online and YouTube, so that you can just hear who they were and go check my work if you like, or just go watch them for fun. And I'll put the card with the way that the percentages broke down for best and worst up while I am reading the names of the rankers out to you. But the YouTube rankers were Shea Frillis Productions, Daz Reviews, LS Mark, ProZD, Keanu Likes Movies, Aldone, Sean Chandler, Austin Burke, Leash, spelled L-E-E-S-H, Chaze, C-H-A-Z-E, Zach Pope, Brian Hull, Sharon Talks Football, Wicked Binge, Aidan Redding, Trev Views, Gabrioni, Real the Seal, Mason IDK, Blockbuster Guy, Arian P, Nate Vlogs, Justin Watches Movies, Tyler Calvert, and More Neester. The online print rankings then came from Vulture, IndieWire, Slant Magazine, Empire Online, The Ringer, Collider, Screen Rant, Medium, BuzzFeed, Variety, Polygon, USA Today, AV Club, Studio Binder, Good Housekeeping, CNET, Affinity Magazine, Screen Crush, Gold Derby, Merchmates, IGN, The Guardian, Business Insider, MovieBite, /Film, Esquire, Cinema Blend, Chris Bowie, Film Purgatory, Cinephile Corner, Gizmodo, What Culture, IGN Southeast Asia, Real Opinion, Henry's Movie Guide, and Yardbarker. I also asked 9 people in my personal life and then took my own vote, so that was the remaining 10. Anyway, I believe that is all I have for you today. So thank you so very much for watching. Please leave your picks for best and worst Pixar films in the comments, or even your entire Pixar ranking list if you feel like it, and your reasons, or just the list. Comment whatever you like. Let's get the discussion on best and worst of Pixar going. And other than that, thank you so very much for watching. And if you are still here, good night, good luck, and...
God, it's hot in here.
That doll